All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Nicole Bendeley, and I'm thrilled to be sharing this session with all of you. We have a huge turnout today, and I'm excited because this is the first time that we've shared this much content in a complimentary session. So before we get started, just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I sent out a workbook earlier today for you to use in our session. So if you did not receive it, you'll see my email address on the screen in front of you. Can you please send me an email and I will do my best to get that workbook out to you. For the rest of you, if you all have it, great, and we'll be referencing it during the session. Now you'll also see in your Zoom controls a Q&A button. So that's where you can ask me questions, and I'll also be asking you questions throughout the session, and that's where you can share your responses so that this can be as interactive as possible. Okay, so we're going to get started. I know we continue to have more people joining us, but we do have a full hour together with lots of great content. So let's get to it. So, who am I? I'm Nicole Bendeley. I am the president of K&Co, and we've been helping teams and leaders to tap into the very best of themselves for over 30 years now. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about how we go about that. But all of the work we do, everything that you're gaining today has been tested and is based on our 30 years of research with teams and leaders around the world. The tools and models you're gaining today are taught and used in postgraduate universities in Canada and in the US, and used by a variety of different industries around the world. So this session isn't just created off the side of my desk. It's based on a significant amount of work and research. I'm also a contributor to Forbes. So if you go to Forbes.com and put in my name, you'll find lots of additional resources and content to add to your leadership and team toolkit. I'm also the author of 2 books, one specific to healthcare and one specific to really helping leaders to achieve greater success in life and in their careers. And for those of you on this call who actually work with us and use our Team Fitness tool, I am the co-creator of the Team Fitness tool, which is a software product that enables organizations to improve the effectiveness of their teams on their own without the use of a consultant. So thank you. That's a bit about me. And as I said, we've been working in the industry and helping teams to improve their performance for over 30 years. And this is just a snapshot of some of the organizations that we work with. You'll see international organizations like the United Nations is using our Team Fitness tool. We work in Canada with McCain, Tim Hortons, in the US, the Federal Reserve of Chicago, a number of healthcare organizations. If you happen to be a part of a healthcare organization, we actually have a healthcare specific webinar happening tomorrow. So if you'd like to take part in that, you can send me a note as well and I'll get you registered. Okay, so let's get to it. And we're also we've authored a number of books on team and leadership performance, which you can find on our website as well. All right, that's enough about us. Let's focus on all of you. So as I said, we've been focused on improving team performance for over 30 years. That is our passion. And we've been asking and answering this one question for over 30 years, which is what's the difference? What's the difference between teams that can achieve exceptional results with ease and those that struggle to keep up? And what we found over the years is that those teams that consistently excel with relative ease demonstrate a core set of practices that others don't. And these practices, it's not rocket science or highly complicated. These are everyday practices that teams that struggle or maybe average performing don't consciously choose to demonstrate. But in our work with teams that aren't performing at their best, when they begin to practice these behaviors and use these very simple tools, we see performance and engagement increase really quickly within 30 days. And so why do I mention engagement? Well, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Marcus Buckingham's latest research, um, the largest worldwide study on employee engagement to date that was just launched and released this summer. And the outcomes of this research show that only 84% of people, or sorry, not only, 84% of people are just coming to work, right? Imagine that, 84% of people are just showing up. They're not engaged. And I had the opportunity to interview Marcus about his most recent research for a Forbes article. And the reason why we're not moving the needle in engagement after millions and millions and millions of dollars are being spent on engagement, I'm sure most of your organizations, if not all of your organizations, are focused on employee engagement. We haven't moved the needle. Okay, in Canada, we've moved the needle by 2%, which is nothing, over the past 4 years. And in the States, we've gone backwards by 2%. And the reason is because organizations are not effectively focused on the areas that have the biggest impact to engagement. And based on this research, the biggest impact is arming teams and leaders with the tools to develop themselves, to create effective teams themselves. And the research shows that when organizations make great teams their primary focus, including what creates them and what can fracture them, we will see more significant rises in global engagement. So it's not to say to do away with these large top-down organizational initiatives to strengthen engagement. We don't want to lose those. But what's missing is enabling teams and leaders to take ownership of their own development, to ensure they're taking action every day and focused on the right practices. And so that's what today is about, focusing you and your team on the practices that will make the biggest difference and to give you a set of tools that you can use in your everyday work to support your team in really making great strides. So let's take a look at what you're walking away with today. So we're going to look at those practices, right? What makes the biggest difference? And then we're going to focus on 4 of those key areas, and you're going to walk away with real tools and strategies to strengthen not only your team effectiveness, but your leadership effectiveness. Okay? So let's start then with what is the difference. So as I said, we've been researching that difference for over 30 years now. And we have found that teams that perform at their very best focus on these 7 areas. Okay, now this team model, just to give you some background, this team model is being taught at universities here in Canada and in the US. This team model is being used around the world. If you Google team fitness test, which is what it used to be called, you will find a number, if you go into Google Scholar, for example, you'll find a number of articles published in peer-reviewed journals that reference the team fitness test. Okay, we've had Johns Hopkins Medical School use this, a number of universities. And so just to share that with you, that it is based on a significant amount of research in team performance. And so we have found that teams that perform well focus and commit to these 7 areas. In your workbook, you have an overview of the 7 elements of a high-performance team. And today I sent you our ebook. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but we're going to focus on 4 of them today. So you're going to gain tools to strengthen 4 of these 7, which we've never done in a complimentary webinar before. Now, these 7 elements are also measured by our team assessment, our team fitness assessment. So if you want to do a quick pulse check of your team and determine how healthy your team's climate is, how cohesive are they, are you being innovative, are you managing change, are you, sharing decision making effectively, you can use our team assessment, which you can find at our website. Okay, it takes 10 minutes to complete and it's highly reliable. And I know some of you are already using it that are on this call. So those are the 7 elements. Now, what are we focusing on today? We're focusing on strengthening your team's climate, building greater cohesiveness, strengthening innovative thinking, and building change compatibility. Now, these are the 4 areas. I've chosen these 4 because generally they represent some of the biggest challenges that leaders have within their teams. And also, when you begin to strengthen these areas even just a little bit, you're going to see significant improvements in engagement, in morale, but not only that, in the way in which you work and achieve results. Okay, you'll see more productivity, more efficiency, less struggle every day. All right, so let's start with cohesiveness. So if you flip open to your workbook on page 4, okay, cohesive teams. All right, I want you to do me a favor. I know I can't see you, but I want you to do I see somebody sent me a note saying, sorry, that you haven't received your materials. If you can send me an email, I will get those to you during the session, if not after, okay? Thank you. So, sorry about that. So cohesiveness, I'd like you to all do me a favor. Raise your hands. I know I can't see you, but raise your hands, all right? Don't worry about people looking at you. All right, I know you're raising your hands on the Zoom, but I want you to physically raise your hands. Physically raise them, even if people are looking at you. Now raise them higher. Now raise them even higher, as high as you possibly can. Stretch, stretch, stretch. All right. Now, I'm going to bet that you didn't raise your hands as high as you possibly could the first time I asked you, right? Maybe you looked around and raised your hand a little bit, or maybe just partly, but you probably didn't raise both of your hands, okay? And the reason why is because I didn't specifically ask you to. I didn't motivate you, explain why, encourage you to. Okay, exceptional teams raise their hands as high as they possibly can. They are consistently reaching for their goals as high as they possibly can. But in order to do that, in order for your teams to stretch themselves and reach as high as they can towards their goals, your teams need to know what they're reaching for. Your teams need to know how to reach for them, what must take priority. They must be motivated and supported in reaching as high as they possibly can. That's what cohesiveness is. Cohesiveness requires agreement on where the team is going, right? Its goals and objectives, and how the team is going to get there. And this requires clarity, right? And connection, meaningful connection to what success looks like. So I want to share a story with you to highlight this, and then you'll be gaining a tool. Okay, this is a story about Southwest. Now, many of you are probably familiar with Southwest and have flown Southwest, especially those of you in the States. And I'm sharing this because Southwest is known as one of the most engaged organizations in the world. And not only are they highly engaged, they are exceptionally profitable and successful as an organization. And they have remained profitable in a very struggling industry, even during the recession, without raising their costs to their passengers. Okay, they still don't charge for their first bag or their second bag. They only charge for your third bag, which is unheard of. Anyway, Herb Keller, who was the founder and CEO, former CEO of Southwest, who recently passed away, is touted as the reason why this organization is such a success and has such an amazing culture. So I'm going to share with you a story about Herb telling his protege, teaching his protege how to one day lead the organization. He turns to his protege, we'll call him David, and he says, David, I can teach you how to lead this organization as well as I can in 30 seconds. Here it goes. Southwest is the low-fare airline. We are not a low-fare airline. We are the low-fare airline. And we provide the most outstanding service. We don't just provide outstanding service, we provide the most outstanding service. And once you understand those two facts, you can make any decision about this organization as well as I can. And he goes on to give an example. He says, so, suppose Sarah from marketing comes into your office and says she has a great idea. She says she thinks that we should include a Caesar salad on the Houston to Vegas flight. And he pauses and asks David. He says, David, what do you say to Sarah? So I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask you the same thing. Okay, suppose you are the CEO of Southwest and your head of marketing comes into your office and has this great idea about Caesar salad. What is your response to Sarah? I want you to think about it for a minute and just jot it down in front of you. What would be your first response to Sarah? Okay. Now, I just led a session yesterday with a group of senior executives where I asked the same question of them. So I'll share some of the responses. Some of the responses were, why? Why is this a great idea? Or why do you want to do this? Other responses are, how much is this going to cost? Okay. What does that look like? Tell me more, right? Or what's the first step you need to take? The first response is actually, thank you. Thank you for coming to me with this idea. The first response is a recognition. It doesn't matter if Sarah's sole job is to come to you with ideas. We still recognize, we still say thank you. We still show that we care that they've actually done their job well. Because at this point, it doesn't matter if it's a good idea or not. We don't know. What's most important initially is to make that person feel good about coming to you with an idea, no matter who they are. So the first response is about recognizing that person. And then the next response is a question. Now, again, a lot of the questions that I often hear first are, how much is it going to cost, right? And getting down into the tasks and the details. We don't want to get down into the details first. The first question is, how? How will adding Caesar salad to the Houston to Vegas flight help us to become the low airfare, the lowest, right, fared airline, and deliver the most outstanding service? We ask a question that links Sarah to our goal, to the vision. And Herb Keller and his leaders were known for walking around the organization and connecting people to the organization's vision and goals. Herb would go to the ground crew and say, so what do you think we need to do differently in order to provide the most outstanding service? Or talk to the logistics team or the finance team and ask, what do we need to do differently to provide the lowest fares possible, right? And engage people in conversation. He and his leaders beat the drum around what we're here to achieve and would engage people in sharing ideas around how to get there by asking questions. So to go back to the example with Sarah, right, at that moment, it doesn't matter if it's a good idea or not. The priority is to recognize, demonstrate value in her, an appreciation, and then ask a question that reminds Sarah of what we're here to do, and then ask the question around it so that she can use her own critical thinking and share with you how her idea will move the organization towards it. And then you can, think about next steps. But the first part is engaging Sarah into the vision, okay, and recognizing her as well. So I have a few questions for you. I don't need to know the answer to these questions, but raise your hand through the Zoom features when you have the answer. How does your team define success? Raise your hand when you have the answer to that question. How does your team define success? Great. I'm seeing some hands being raised. All right. Now, thank you. Oh, good job. I see more hands being raised. Awesome job. Now, if you don't have your hands raised, that's okay. If you don't have the answer to this, that's okay. More often than not, when I ask this question to a group of leaders or even teams, intact teams through our team development workshops, I often get blank stares, okay? And that's okay because most teams don't take the time to think about what does success look like for us. Most teams know the vision of the organization, right? But that's not what I'm asking here. In Southwest, for example, every team has a success statement that aligns with the organization's vision. Each team's success statement, so for example, the marketing team, that defines what their team is fanatically focused on achieving, what's unique about them and contributes to the larger vision. It's measurable and it keeps the team fanatically focused on where they're going. So the risk in not knowing what success looks like for your team results in people pulling in different directions, results in less engagement, results in less empowerment because it makes it more difficult to make decisions when we don't know if this decision, where it's going to lead us. Is it going to lead us towards our goal or away from our goal if we don't know what that goal is? So the first step, if you don't know what success looks like for your team, bring your team together and define it. And you have that in your workbook, okay, on page 5, the opportunity to do that. Now, my next question for you is just as important. What are your team's top 3 priorities for achieving success? And by priorities, I don't mean tasks or projects, right? I mean, is quality a priority? Are people a priority? Is service a priority? Is safety a priority? What are your team's top 3 priorities that, again, your team needs to use in decision making, that your team needs to be fanatically focused on? This will drive the priority of your tasks and initiatives. If you don't know, so raise your hand when you know them, okay? And if you don't know them, you can bet your team doesn't know them. Awesome. I see people raising their hands. Awesome. I love it. And again, if you don't have them, that's okay. It's just an indication that, you know what? I need to bring my team together and have this conversation. And if you are one of the leaders that raised your hand, okay, what I'd ask of you is next time in your team meeting, ask this question: what do you believe our top 3 priorities for achieving success are? And see how aligned your team members are. If they're aligned, great. If they're not, that's just an opportunity to create greater alignment and clarity. All right. Next question. I love questions. Same thing. Raise your hand when you know it. What are the behaviors your team members must demonstrate every day to achieve success? Okay. Awesome. So another way I ask this question is, let's say I've joined your team. I'm a new member and I ask, what are the three practices that I need to focus on, or the 3 behaviors that will make the biggest difference to this team's effectiveness that I should really focus on? How would you answer that? Can you answer it? Right? And then finally, when was the last time you talked about organizational goals, team goals, priorities, and values with those you lead? And the answer you're looking for is today or yesterday. Be like Herb Keller, right? Find opportunities to weave your success statement into everyday conversations. Weave your priorities, your values by having questions and conversations about them. It doesn't have to be formal. It can be in the everyday. So you've got, and if you don't have your workbook, I will send it to you today. You've got up to page 6, the opportunity to do some work in strengthening cohesiveness if this is something that you want to strengthen. Now, I'd also like to point out you also have a quick assessment on page 4 that you can use to gauge the cohesiveness of your team. Now, I've included some assessments for some of the elements, and this is a snapshot of our team fitness assessment. So you can get a sense of what that assessment looks like if you want to have your team assess themselves, and they can give you feedback on how the team is doing. All right, so let's move on to healthy climate. A healthy climate, honestly, everybody, is the foundation of a healthy team. Okay. A healthy climate is one based on trust, right? Respect, open communication. There's a feeling of safety, of psychological safety within the team that I'll talk about in a second. And you have a quick assessment on page 7 that can help you gauge the health of your climate. Now, climates can either be warm, right? This is a quote from a nurse that I interviewed for our healthcare book describing how healthy and warm her climate feels, right? She's describing that there's no ego, there's no jockeying for position, right? No pecking order, that everybody is just there for the patient, for their families, for one another, and she never feels alone. Now, remember that, because one of the keys to engagement is people feeling connected to other people and never feeling alone. And when you're on an effective team, that's a consistent feeling people have. There's a strong sense of teamwork. They know their team members have their backs. They can be themselves and ask questions, right? Share opinions. This is a warm climate. This is a healthy climate. A cold climate is unhealthy. A cold climate, there is no trust, there is no respect, or there's a lack of it. And people feel depleted at the end of the day. They go home feeling depleted, not because of the amount of work that they have, but because of their interactions with their colleagues, with their team members. In an unhealthy climate, energy is depleted from each other based on how we treat each other, based on a lack of trust and respect, based on miscommunication, based on unproductive, unhealthy conflict. Okay, so people leave exhausted. In a healthy climate, we could be, have a ton of work and be stressed from the work, but still go home energized because of the support and collaboration and positive energy we're getting from our teammates. And so it is critical for it, not only engagement, but for well-being of your team members' health to create a healthy team climate. Now, a healthy climate is based on psychological safety. And psychological safety is an environment in which we can be ourselves, right? We don't have to put on armor and show up ready for battle or to protect ourselves, where we can be ourselves, we can ask questions, we can challenge ideas, enter into productive conflict and healthy conflict with others, which is critical to innovative thinking, which I'll be getting to in a minute. Okay. Now, an individual is 12 times more likely to be engaged when they trust their leader. So, if the health of your climate is lacking, if there's a lack of trust in your team, then it starts with you, the leader, to begin building that trust. And it will take time. I'm not saying when trust has been eroded and respect has been eroded that this is going to change around overnight. The climate is the most difficult element to strengthen. But when there's a focus on it and genuine focus, you will see a difference. And it starts with you, the leader. And it starts by first understanding what trust looks like. So, trust is built when we achieve results, right? When we show we know what we're doing. okay, when we are a good leader, when we are good, let's say we are a CFO, we're good at finance, right? When we're a good marketer, when we're technically good at our job, but also have strong characteristics of a leader, which includes demonstrating integrity, right? So demonstrating integrity simply means walking the talk, right? We do our actions speak louder than words. We do what we say we're going to do. We treat everyone with equal respect. We communicate honestly, right? What we say reflects what we know. I know sometimes we can't be 100% transparent, but we share what we can in an honest way. And one of the most important pieces in trust building from a leadership perspective is showing concern for the well-being of others. And when trust is lacking within your team, this is the place to start. So we can show concern for the well-being of others in a number of ways. When we coach people, when we have opportunities, when we ask questions and ask ideas and ask for input, that's showing that we're interested and value other people's opinions. So the more we can engage and ask questions, the more we will build trust and show that we care about other people's perspectives and we value it. One of the other most important ways to show concern for others is when we show appreciation for others. And as William James said, the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. So I want to share another story with you. And it's a story about an executive at Scotiabank, which is, for those of you outside of Canada, is one of our top financial institutions here. We don't have as many as you in the States. And Scotiabank is international. And this leader was the leader that was called into struggling branches. He was the guy that was called to go into a branch and turn it around quickly. And he used to work in the Caribbean and would be called into going into branches in the Caribbean. And Scotiabank actually just sold off their Caribbean branches, but he would be called in to the Caribbean branches to turn them around quickly. And as an example, he went into one Caribbean location and it was the second least profitable, and within 6 months, it was the second most profitable. And so you would think that a banker would go in and focus on cost savings, would immediately start cutting, right? Pulling back on staff, etc., restructuring. But that's actually not what he did. And when I asked him what his secret sauce was, his response was people. People need to know that they're valued and that they can make a real difference and that they are making a difference. And so instead of going in and focusing on all the things that were going wrong within the branch, he focused on all the things that were going right, no matter how small. He recognized people for their contributions, for the way they treated customers. He reminded people on the difference that they were making in people's lives, that they weren't just tellers, that they were helping people save for a house or send their kids to university or what have you. And in a community in the Caribbean, he was reminding his staff the difference that they were making in the community. He started having Monday morning celebration huddles where he would recognize people individually. He would send emails and CC the head of the Caribbean on them when he'd send an email to a staff thanking them for how they cared for a customer. He would recognize the little things. And that built trust immediately with him. Trust in his decision making, trust that he cared about them. And he did have to make some tough decisions. And when he did those tough decisions, people were more likely to support them because they knew he was there for the right reasons and he cared about them. So focus on your people. If you're not recognizing and appreciating your people, that's the place to start. And make the most of your one-to-one meetings. Now, if you're a leader and you meet maybe monthly, let's say, with each of your team members, oftentimes with the leaders that I coach, and even in our leadership development sessions, when I ask, okay, what do your one-to-ones look like? They're often status updates. This is a critical opportunity to make the most of your time with your staff and ask some different questions. Ask questions that demonstrate you care about their careers, that you care about them as individuals, that you're invested in them, that you're present and in the moment with them. So here, and I'm going to send you these slides, so you don't need to take a picture or what have you. Here are some questions to include in your one-to-ones that will build a greater connection between you and your team members, that will build engagement and trust. So questions like, so tell me, what matters most to you at work? And this is an important question because we know that when people are connected to meaningful projects, right, or connected to initiatives and tasks that they're interested in, that's purposeful and aligned with their values, they're much more likely to be engaged, right, and will stay. What makes a good day for you, right? What's a great day at work for you? Or when we are at our best as a team, what does that look like? Or what are you most proud of this month? What are your top priorities this month? And what challenges are you experiencing, right? And this is a really important question. Is there anything I could be doing differently or better? Trust is also built, which wasn't on the previous slide, when we show vulnerability, when we show that we're open to feedback, when we share our own learning, when we ask questions, when we delegate, and when we ask, is there anything I could be doing differently or better in a genuine, open way that's non-defensive, man, that might take your team members aback if you've never asked that before. But it's such an important way to show that, you know what, I'm learning too, and I want to be better for you and my team, and I'm open to feedback. That builds trust. And then finally, how can I help? If you don't have any of these questions in your one-to-ones, I suggest choosing a couple and incorporating them and changing how you have conversations with your team members so they are a little bit more genuine, a little bit more purposeful, and are really focused on getting the best from your team members. All right, so that is team climate, okay? Now we're moving on to the next element, which is innovative thinking. Now, this is actually an element we added to our team assessment maybe 15 years ago. We test our team assessment and our team model regularly to ensure that it's reliable and it's still relevant and we're not missing anything. But we consciously choose not to update it unless it's necessary because people use it for years and years and we don't want to mess up their data. But if it's necessary that you know what, we're really missing something here, we'll add something. And it was clear that we were missing innovative thinking about 15 years ago. And innovative thinking isn't about, you know, coming up with a big brand new product, right? Like something that's going to rival the iPad or something, right? Or whatever your biggest competitor is, a new product. No, innovative thinking is about your team members consciously choosing to think differently, right? Regularly. Innovative thinking is about challenging the status quo by asking, you know, I know we've used this process for 10 years now and it's been working, but is it the best way? Have we thought of doing it a different way for better results? Should we explore that? It's about coming up with different ideas and exploring them and not just assuming that because we've done it this way for so many years that that's the best way to go about it. right? It's about carving out space and time in your team meetings. This isn't about adding time. This is about using your time wisely. Okay? Carving out space in your team meetings to ask for different ideas, to explore the minority out of box idea that's shared in your team meeting, as opposed to just shutting it down and saying, you know what, that likely won't work in our culture. What other ideas do you have? Or that's not the way things are done here. No, let's explore it, right? Innovative thinking requires risk taking. And I don't mean risk taking that's going to, put the company in peril or put your clients in peril or your patients at risk. I mean the freedom to try new things and knowing that it's okay to make a mistake because we're going to learn from it and see if it works or not. Let's give it a go, right? It's about, like I said, challenging the status quo intentionally for the purpose of coming up with the best decision, the best way of doing things. And it also involves challenging one another's thinking, right? And this is all on page 8. So in order to think innovatively, in order to challenge one another's thinking, right, that's about challenging assumptions. So when someone says, for example, you know what, that'll never fly here, that's a big assumption. And we can challenge that by saying, okay, well, tell me more about that. How do we know that it'll never work here? Let's explore it. It's critical to challenge assumptions that beliefs that people just hold to be true without checking them, right? That's challenging one another's thinking in an open way. It's not challenging the person, it's the thinking and the idea and the assumption. And that requires a healthy climate. So I go back to before. We need that trust and respect and almost permission to be able to have dialogue in this way, to challenge each other for the purpose of being better. How can we look at things differently to be even better? So, my questions for you to leave you with are, to what degree does your team practice innovative thinking, right? And so on page 8, you have that assessment that you can take. And then what gets in the way of greater innovative thinking in your team? And the responses I often get in our leadership development sessions and team development sessions is A, time. We just don't have the time. B, you know what, we don't think of ourselves as innovative. We've got a lot of procedures and policies that limit us, right? Or I'm just not a creative thinker, right? Or innovation doesn't really apply to our team. And I challenge that assumption. So here are some tips. First of all, define it. Okay, bring it back to your team and say, okay, what does innovative thinking for us look like? And I've shared some examples with you based on our team assessment, right? That's how we define it. And is it important to us? How would being more innovative in our thinking help us be even better at what we do? And then clarify, right? Set some expectations around why it's important and allow some permission. And how are we going to achieve this together? What do we need to do differently in our team meetings, right? So that brings me to scheduling it. Carve out time. So if your team meetings are full of a whole bunch of, a whole list of topics that you probably don't even get through, and most of them are a status dump, okay, that's not using your time effectively. In our meeting effectiveness course, one of our elements, right, you'll see in your ebook is group work skills. Meetings, and that's all about meeting effectiveness. The time you spend in your meeting is priceless. If you're spinning your wheels, not staying on track, ending up having to have 5 meetings to accomplish what could be done in one, you're wasting time and energy. And so your meetings should be structured in such a way that allows you to, yes, update people and share information with information that needs to be shared in person, maybe, and to get input. But the majority of your session should be focused on gaining input, generating ideas, making decisions, and moving business forward, and collaborating and hearing different perspectives. And that's where innovative thinking comes in. So if most of your meetings are about status updates, look at how you can restructure the time you spend together to ensure you're actually making the best decisions and having the best dialogue and getting the best ideas to make the best decisions that will actually be supported by your team members and executed against. So if you're struggling with your meetings, reach out to me personally. I'm happy to share some resources with you because that's essential. Ask more questions. All right. So in my experience, many leaders have this prescribing solutions, problem, right? That's their first instinct. When somebody comes to them with an issue, you give them the solution, or you take it on yourself and say, just leave it for me, I'll do it. If you leave this webinar with only one thing you're going to do differently, I encourage you for that to be ask more questions. Start with a question. Okay? Tell me more about it. How might you address that issue, right? What do you really want to achieve? Or how do you know that's true? What help do you need? Ask some questions and challenge assumptions. When you, first of all, notice them. Notice when dialogue is being shut down within the team because of unproductive assumptions or unhealthy assumptions. And challenge them openly just by simply saying, okay, I know we think that, and we've thought that for a while, that that wouldn't work here, but what if it could? What would that look like? So if dialogue isn't happening within your team and exploring ideas isn't happening naturally, it's up to you, the leader, to be intentional and create that dialogue by asking questions, by noticing the assumptions, calling them out openly, and talking about them. Okay. The final element is change compatibility. Okay, this is another, I'm sure all of you, I would be shocked if anybody is on this webinar that isn't experiencing change right now, right? It is a constant. And while change is inevitable, progress is optional, okay? Progress depends on your team being open and responsive to change, regardless of whether or not they agree with the change. Okay, so in my experience, there are 3 different responses from teams to change, right? There's the rigid response, where teams will fight against the change, right? They'll resist it. They have a strong negative emotional response, and they focus only on why this idea is terrible, right? This is the worst idea ever. We're not going to execute against it. There's just strong negative emotion and resentment. That's often based out of fear, right? It's the fear of letting go, of not wanting to let go. It's disagreement with the decision. It's not understanding the decision or lack of trust, right? So that's on the one side, the resistance. Then we see the complacent team, right? This is the team that sort of puts their heads down and just hopes that the change will go away, right? We call them change survivors. They see change come and go, and they think, you know what, this will never stick. If I just ignore it, it'll go away. And so I'm not going to put any urgency behind it. I'm not going to prioritize it. I'm just not, if they force me to do it, I will, but I'm not going to make it a priority. And then there's the flexible team. The flexible team chooses, they make a conscious choice to approach the change openly and productively. The flexible team doesn't have any less fear. than the rigid or complacent team. The flexible team doesn't have any fewer concerns or negative emotions around change because we all respond to change differently. It's just that the flexible team chooses not to allow those emotions to drive their behavior. So I compare the rigid team. So the rigid team will move to Pity City and they'll set up shop, right? And they'll live there for the remainder of the change and focus on all the reasons why the change is a terrible idea and what it's doing to them. Whereas the flexible team drives to Pity City for a pity cup of coffee because flexible teams and exceptional leaders know the importance of bringing a team together to vent, to express concerns, to share fears for the purpose of hearing each other, for the purpose of supporting each other. You, the leader, might not have a solution to their fear. That's okay. People just want to be heard. And so the flexible team goes to Pity City for a pity cup of coffee, and then they drive home looking for ways to make that change work, looking for ways to support each other through the change. Okay? So really, in an exceptional team, the team moves through the William Bridges change model, and I've got a lot of detail about this model in your notes, but I just want to touch on it for a second. Okay, some of you might be familiar with this. This model shows that we go through, regardless of whether it's a change that we're super excited about, even when we get married, if you're getting married, you're excited, hopefully, right? Or you get a big promotion. There's still this first phase, the ending phase, the losing and letting go phase, where we're mourning, what we're letting go of, the current state. We've got fears of moving to this new unknown state. And that letting go is easier for some than for others, right? And as leaders, we can support people in moving through the letting go phase by creating the space to hear people's concerns and by sharing and having a dialogue around why the decision is being made, being transparent and honest in the impact that the decision is having. Don't put on the rose-colored glasses and only focus on all of the great reasons why this decision is happening, because people will see through that. People know that there are some downsides sometimes, right? So if there are, be transparent and genuine and honest about that. And share how you're going to support them in mitigating some of the negative impacts if you can, right? Create space for team members to clarify what they need from one another and identify, okay, in order to ensure we get through this change and can execute it to our very best, what do we need to do? What are those best practices that we need to keep top of mind? Have space and share as much information and provide as much support as you can. The next phase is the neutral zone, and I don't really know why they call it the neutral zone because it's not very neutral, right? This is where you start executing against the change. People start practicing the new behaviors, start using the new processes, start living in this new environment, whatever it might be, in this new way of being. And people will experience frustration in trying new things. This is where we'll see productivity dip. So the more you can communicate and connect and check in with your team members around how's it going, what's working, what's not, what might be we need to do differently, and also connecting them to the goal around where we're trying to get to and why, will help keep people motivated and know that you're invested in supporting them through the change. If you can support people through these two phases well, they're going to get to the new beginning phase more smoothly and quickly, which is this new appreciation and even excitement, hopefully, for this new way of being, or at least acceptance of it and support of it. And the way you show up through this change is essential. And what's hard as a leader is that Sometimes you're having difficulty with the change, right? You're holding on to the past, right? And you're not happy with the change for whatever reason. And so I want to end this, we've got 6 minutes. I want to end this part of the session with another story. And it's actually a story about two monks. And the story goes they were about to cross a river to go to a village on the other side. And it was a low river, but that they could cross. And a woman approached them and said, "Kind sirs, my village and my children are across the way, and I don't have time to walk around the river, but I can't swim. Will you help me across?" And the first monk turned to her and said, "I'm so sorry, madam, but it's against our beliefs to touch women. I'm sorry you're going to have to walk around." And the second monk didn't say anything, just gently took the woman by the arm and started walking across the river with her to help her across. And the first monk looked shocked, and the whole way across the river was saying, "What are you doing? You're breaking our vows. We're not allowed to do this. What are you doing?" They got to the other side, and the second monk, let the woman go and said goodbye, and they kept on walking. And for the whole, next mile or two, that first monk kept saying, "How could you do that? What were you doing? You broke our vows." Finally, the second monk said, "I let that woman go over an hour ago. Why are you still carrying her?" And so, what I'd like to leave you with is a question. How does that story apply to you and your team in leading change? What are you carrying, whether beliefs, right, or assumptions or values that, not values, but more assumptions or past experiences, right? What are you holding on to that might be affecting your ability to be open to a change you're having difficulty with? How might you see things differently? What do you need to let go of in order to work through and lead change? What does your team need to let go of? What are they carrying, or certain members? So if you want that story, I'm happy to send it to you. We actually have a number of tools like that, number of stories like that we include in our team fitness tool that come along with the team assessment. So I'm happy to send you a sample of one. And on page 11 of your workbook, you have a practice the art of letting go exercise. And I encourage you, if you're leading a change initiative that you or your team are struggling with, this is a really great exercise to use for yourself and with your team. Okay, what does your team need to let go of? What are we holding on to that's inhibiting us from moving forward? And then finally, I really encourage you on page 11, before you run to your next meeting, I really encourage you to take time to think about what's one thing as a result of this webinar, this learning, you're going to do to help your team be even better than they already are. This isn't about fixing your team. This is about enabling more greatness and removing the struggle of the day-to-day work. So if you'd like some, to get some regular strategies and tools from us, feel free to sign up for our newsletter, connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, email me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I love having conversations and helping leaders to thrive, whether it's just through conversations, through our leadership coaching and development sessions, our team development sessions, just through conversation. So reach out, and I really hope this was of value to you, and I'll follow up with the slides. Okay, I wish you all a really great day. All the best.